Victoria Chen was worth $3 billion, and used it to getting exactly what she wanted. Until Eli Brennan walked into her Manhattan boardroom and said the one word no one had ever dared say to her: no. What started as a power struggle on the 48th floor would become the most dangerous game of her life. Because when a woman who's built an empire on control meets a man who refuses to be controlled, someone has to surrender. And what she didn't know was that Eli had his own reason for taking this job. A reason that would destroy everything. The conference room on the 48th floor of Chen Dynamics had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. But Victoria Chen wasn't admiring the view. She was staring at the man who just called her strategy suicide. At 36, Victoria had built a tech investment empire worth $3 billion by trusting her instincts and crushing anyone who questioned them. Her black Armani suit fit like a second skin. Her 5-inch Louboutins added height she didn't need. And her dark hair was pulled back so severely it could have been a weapon. Everything about her screamed power, control, winner. The man sitting across from her didn't seem impressed. Eli Brennan slouched in his chair like he was bored, arms crossed over a chest that clearly saw more gym time than boardroom time. His charcoal suit was expensive enough, but he wore it the way other men wore jeans, casual and unconcerned. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it instead of combing it. Sharp jawline. Green eyes that held hers without a flicker of intimidation. He was attractive in that raw, unpolished way that made women look twice and men step carefully. "Let me be clear, Mr. Brennan." Victoria's voice could have cut glass. "I didn't hire you to critique my expansion strategy. I hired you to execute it. Then you hired the wrong person." His voice was low, steady, with a roughness that suggested he hadn't grown up in boardrooms. "You brought me in as senior strategy consultant because your stock dropped 18% in 6 months and your board is circling like sharks. If you wanted someone to smile and nod, you should have promoted one of the terrified yes men outside that door." Victoria's assistant Maya made a choking sound from her position near the door. No one spoke to Victoria Chen like that. Ever. Victoria's fingers tightened on her Mont Blanc pen, the only sign of the fury building beneath her composed exterior. "Your resume was impressive. MIT, 3 years at Goldman Sachs, built 2 startups from nothing. I expected brilliance. What I'm getting is insubordination. You're getting honesty." Eli stood, and Victoria found herself tracking the movement despite her anger. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with an easy confidence that came from earning respect rather than buying it. "Your Southeast Asian expansion is smart. Your timeline is fantasy. Push this hard and you'll crash your own company, trying to prove you're invincible. I've built my entire career on doing what everyone said was impossible. And that's exactly why you're going to fail this time." He gathered his leather portfolio, and for one absurd moment, Victoria thought he might actually walk out on her. "You're so used to winning that you've forgotten how to listen. Your team is exhausted, your projections ignore reality, and you're bleeding talent because people would rather quit than tell you you're wrong." Each word landed like a physical blow. Victoria rose to her full height, though even in heels she barely reached his shoulder. "You're fired." "No, I'm not." Eli moved toward the door, then paused, turning back with a look that made something hot and unwelcome coil in her stomach. "You signed me to a 1-year contract with a penalty clause that would cost you 7 figures to break. I read the fine print, even if you didn't. Whether you like it or not, I'm the only person in this building who'll tell you the truth." He walked out. Victoria stood frozen, her pulse hammering in her throat. In 15 years of building Chen Dynamics from a scrappy startup to a corporate empire, no one had challenged her like that. No one had looked at her with those cool green eyes and seen past the money, the power, the reputation that made grown men stammer. No one had ever made her feel so thoroughly dismissed. "Miss Chen," Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "Should I call security?" Victoria's laugh came out sharp and bitter. "And have them do what? Throw out the one consultant I can't legally fire?" She sank into her chair, the leather creaking in the sudden silence. Through the glass walls, she could see her employees pretending not to stare. Word would spread through the building in minutes. Victoria Chen, the woman who'd made venture capitalists weep and competitors flee, had just been walked out on by her own hire. "Pull his file," Victoria said, her voice returning to its usual command. "Everything. Education, employment history, references. There has to be something we missed." Maya's fingers flew across her tablet. "I have it here. Eli Brennan, 33, MIT, graduated top 5%. Goldman Sachs, promoted twice in 3 years. Left to start a fintech company, sold it for $40 million. Started a second company, failed. Bounced back with consulting. Reputation for turning around struggling firms." She paused. "There's a gap, though. 2 years between high school and MIT. No record of what he was doing." Victoria leaned forward. "What else?" "He grew up in Boston. Single mother. Worked as..." Maya's eyes widened. "As an executive assistant." Something cold slid down Victoria's spine. Executive assistants didn't raise kids who went to MIT unless someone was paying for it. Scholarship, maybe. Or something else. "Keep digging," Victoria said. "I want to know everything about Eli Brennan. Where he came from, who he knows, why he really took this job. Because men like Eli Brennan, men with MIT degrees and Goldman Sachs pedigrees and $40 million exits, didn't take consulting positions at companies they thought were doomed. They didn't walk into offices and pick fights with billionaire CEOs unless they had a reason." Victoria pulled up his contract on her screen, scanning for loopholes. There had to be a way out. She'd negotiated $100 million deals, outmaneuvered hostile takeover attempts, and built an empire from nothing. She could handle one arrogant consultant who thought he could say no to her. She'd destroyed bigger obstacles than Eli Brennan. Or so she thought. Victoria arrived at her office at 6:30, earlier than usual. She needed the quiet, the control of an empty building where she could think without interruption. What she didn't need was to find Eli Brennan sitting at her conference table, laptop open, surrounded by printouts. "How did you get in here?" She set her coffee down harder than intended. "Janine at security likes me." He didn't look up from his screen. "I brought her coffee and told her I had work to do. She has a son applying to MIT. I gave her some advice." "So, you charmed your way past building security." "I prefer to think of it as relationship building." He finally looked at her, and something in his gaze made her acutely aware that she'd skipped the severe bun this morning, leaving her hair loose around her shoulders. His eyes tracked the change before returning to her face. "You should try it sometime. I don't need to charm people. I sign their paychecks. And that's why your employee retention is down 30%. He pushed a folder across the table. "I worked up an alternative timeline for the Southeast Asian expansion. 6-month delay, phased approach, 3 regional offices instead of 5. It cuts your initial capital expenditure in half, and gives you time to build local partnerships instead of bulldozing in like you own the place. Victoria picked up the folder, scanning the first page. The analysis was thorough, the projections conservative but realistic. She hated that it made sense. "This is good work," she admitted, then immediately wanted to take it back when she saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Thank you." He stood, walking to her espresso machine without asking permission. "You take it black, 2 shots, no sugar. You drink 4 cups before noon, and probably shouldn't. How do you—" "I pay attention." He made 2 espressos, sliding one across to her. "You also tap your pen exactly 3 times before signing documents. You take calls standing up when you're about to destroy someone. And you rub your left temple when you're stressed. Like you're doing right now." Victoria's hand dropped from her temple. "That's very observant." "That's my job." He leaned against her desk, too close to be professional, too far to be intimate. The morning light caught the gold flecks in his green eyes. "You hired me to see what no one else sees. Problem is, I see everything." Her pulse kicked up. "And what exactly do you see?" "A woman who's been running so hard for so long. She's forgotten why she started." His voice softened, lost some of its edge. "You built this company to prove something. To someone. Probably someone who's not around anymore to see it. And now you don't know how to stop." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Her father's face flashed through her mind. That last conversation before the heart attack. "You'll never make it, Victoria. Women don't build empires." "You don't know anything about me," she said, but her voice lacked its usual bite. "I know you got here at 6:30, even though you probably didn't sleep more than 4 hours. I know you're wearing the same bracelet you wore yesterday, which means you didn't go home. And I know that whatever you're trying to prove, you're going to kill yourself doing it if you don't slow down." Victoria's fingers went to the platinum bracelet, her mother's last gift before cancer took her. She never took it off, never expected anyone to notice. "The expansion happens," she said, forcing steel back into her voice. "But we'll use your timeline." Eli nodded slowly, something that looked like respect crossing his features. "That's the smartest thing you've said since I met you." "Don't get used to winning, Mr. Brennan." "Eli, and this isn't about winning." He moved toward the door, then paused. "It's about you not losing everything you've built, because you're too stubborn to accept help." After he left, Victoria sat in her chair, staring at the folder. She hated that he was right. Hated it more that part of her wanted to know what else he saw. The board meeting at 10 was supposed to be routine. Monthly performance review, quarterly projections. The usual theatre of corporate governance. What Victoria didn't expect was for Eli to be standing at the head of the table when she walked in. "What's going on?" She looked at Richard Coleman, the board chairman and her father's oldest friend. "Mr. Brennan requested time to present an alternative strategy," Richard said, his tone carefully neutral. "Given the recent stock volatility, the board agreed it was prudent to hear him out." Victoria's jaw tightened. Eli had gone around her. Straight to the board. It was a power move, brilliant and infuriating in equal measure. "By all means," she said, taking her seat at the opposite end of the table. "Let's hear what Mr. Brennan has to say." If Eli felt the ice in her voice, he didn't show it. He pulled up a presentation on the screen, and Victoria hated that her first thought was how good he looked in the navy suit, how the confidence in his stance made every other man in the room look smaller. Chen Dynamics has an 82% success rate on acquisitions, Eli began. That's exceptional. But your current expansion plan has a projected success rate of 43%. The difference? Speed over strategy. He clicked to the next slide, showing two timelines side by side. Victoria's aggressive 6-month push versus his measured year-long approach. Miss Chen built this company on bold moves, Eli continued. But bold doesn't mean reckless. Every successful expansion she's executed had 3 elements: local partnerships, market research, and staged implementation. The current plan has none of those. Board member Jennifer Park leaned forward. What are you proposing? Victoria watched Eli command the room, explaining phased approaches and risk mitigation with the kind of clarity that made complex strategy sound simple. He referenced market data she knew he'd had to pull together in less than 12 hours. He'd anticipated every question, prepared for every objection. He was brilliant, and he was making her look impulsive. The 6-month delay will cost us market position, Victoria interjected, unable to stay silent. Our competitors won't wait. Our competitors are already failing in these markets, Eli countered, meeting her eyes across the table. Tech Venture pulled out of Jakarta last quarter. Innovate Capital lost 40 million in Singapore. They're failing because they're doing exactly what you're about to do. Moving fast and breaking things works until you're the thing that breaks. The tension between them crackled like electricity. Every board member's eyes moved from Victoria to Eli and back again, watching the power struggle play out. You're risk-averse, Victoria said. You're risk-addicted, Eli shot back. There's a difference between courage and a death wish. Richard cleared his throat. I think we should put this to a vote. All in favor of adopting Mr. Brennan's modified timeline? Victoria watched in disbelief as every hand went up. Every single one. The motion carries, Richard said. Victoria, work with Mr. Brennan to implement the revised strategy. Meeting adjourned. The board filed out, leaving Victoria and Eli alone in the conference room. She stood slowly, fury and something else. Something uncomfortably close to admiration warring inside her. You went behind my back, she said quietly. I went to the board with a better plan. Eli started gathering his materials. That's not betrayal. That's my job. Your job is to work for me. No. He looked up, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. My job is to save this company. Even from you if I have to. Victoria crossed the room, stopping inches from him. Close enough to see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Close enough to catch the scent of cedar and something darker. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you. His voice dropped. The difference is, I know when to fold. I don't fold. I know. Something flickered in his eyes. That's what worries me. They stood there. The air between them thick with challenge, and something neither wanted to name. Victoria's pulse hammered in her throat. This close, she could see the exact shade of green in his eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. This isn't over, she said. I hope not. The corner of his mouth lifted. Where's the fun and easy? He walked out, leaving Victoria standing in the empty conference room, her heart racing. The problem wasn't that Eli challenged her. It was that she was starting to like it. By 9 p.m., the 48th floor was empty, except for the ambient glow of computer screens and the low hum of the HVAC system. Victoria had sent Maya home hours ago, determined to review the merger documents alone. She needed the silence, the solitude, the control. What she got was Eli walking into her office with 2 bags of takeout. "You need to stop breaking into my office," Victoria said, not looking up from her laptop. "Your assistant gave me the access code." He set the bags on her conference table. "Said you forget to eat when you're working. Thai from that place on Lexington. Pad CEW, extra vegetables, mild spice." Victoria's stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. "How did you—" "I asked Maya what you order." He unpacked containers, the smell of basil and garlic filling the office. "Turns out your assistant is very chatty when you're not around to terrify her." "I don't terrify Maya." "You terrify everyone." Eli opened a container of spring rolls. "Except me." Victoria saved her document and moved to the table, telling herself it was just about the food. "Why don't I terrify you?" "Because I grew up with nothing." He handed her chopsticks. "My mum worked 3 jobs to keep us in a 1-bedroom in Dorchester. I wore second-hand clothes and lied about having lunch money." You can't scare someone who's already survived being invisible. It was the most he'd said about his past. Victoria found herself leaning forward, curious despite herself. "But you got into MIT. Full scholarship. Worked as a janitor in the physics building to cover expenses." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The professors would leave their lectures on the boards. I'd read them while I cleaned, teach myself at night. One of them caught me solving an equation he'd left unsolved. Turned out to be my admission ticket." "That's remarkable. That's survival." Eli met her eyes. "I learned early that the only person I could count on was myself. Sound familiar?" It did. More than Victoria wanted to admit. She'd built Chen Dynamics alone, fought for every contract, every investor, every win. Her father had left her nothing but debt and doubt. "My father thought women couldn't run companies," she heard herself say. "Told me I'd fail before my first round of funding. I built this empire to prove him wrong. Did it work? He died before I could show him." The words came out flat. Practice. "Heart attack. I was 23, 6 months into my first startup." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was an ass." Victoria stabbed at her noodles. "But he was my ass. And I wanted him to see that I could do everything he said I couldn't. And now you can't stop proving it." Eli's voice was gentle. "Even though there's no one left to prove it to." The observation cut deeper than it should have. Victoria set down her chopsticks. "Is that your professional assessment?" "That's my personal observation." He reached across the table, and his fingers brushed hers as he moved the soy sauce closer. The contact lasted less than a second, but Victoria felt it everywhere. Their eyes met, held. "We should get back to work," Victoria said, but she didn't move. "Probably." Eli didn't move either. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights in the darkness. Up here, it felt like they were the only 2 people in the world. No board, no employees, no expectations. Just a woman who'd built everything and a man who understood what it cost. "The merger documents," Victoria said, finally breaking the moment. "Section 7 needs revision." "Already flagged it." Eli pulled his laptop closer and they fell into the familiar rhythm of work. But something had shifted. The arguing had an edge of play now, their disagreements feeling more like chess moves than combat. "You're wrong about the valuation," Victoria said, pulling up a spreadsheet. I'm never wrong about valuations. Eli leaned over to see her screen, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. Show me. She walked him through her analysis, acutely aware of his proximity, the way he smelled like cedar and coffee, the way his breathing changed when he concentrated. When she reached across for her pen, her hand landed on his. They both froze. Sorry, Victoria said, but she didn't pull away. Don't be. Eli's voice was rough. For a suspended moment, neither moved. Victoria could feel her pulse in her throat, could see the exact moment Eli's pupils dilated. One of them just needed to lean in, just a few inches. The phone on Victoria's desk rang, shrill and sudden. They jerked apart. Victoria grabbed the phone, her hand shaking slightly. Chen. It was Richard, calling about the board's concerns over the timeline adjustment. She took the call standing, walking to the window, putting distance between herself and the conference table. When she hung up, Eli was packing up his laptop. It's late, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. We should call it. Right, yes. He moved toward the door, then paused. Victoria? Yes. You're allowed to want things that aren't about proving something. His smile was sad. In case no one ever told you that. She watched him leave and realized she'd been holding her breath. The Children's Hospital benefit at the Plaza was the social event of the season. 500 of Manhattan's wealthiest gathered in the grand ballroom to write checks and be seen. Victoria wore a midnight blue gown that cost more than most people's cars. Her hair swept up, diamonds at her throat and ears. She looked every inch the billionaire queen. She hadn't expected to see Eli. But there he was, standing near the bar in a tuxedo that fit him like it was custom-made, talking to Jennifer Park from her board. He looked uncomfortable, but not out of place. Like a man who'd learned to navigate these waters but hadn't been born to them. Victoria felt something dangerous twist in her chest. Victoria Chen. Marcus Webb materialized at her elbow, drink in hand. Marcus ran the second-largest tech fund in the city and had been trying to merge with Chen Dynamics for years. You look devastating. Who's your date? I don't do dates, Marcus. You know that. Pity. His eyes tracked across the room. Speaking of dates, who's the handsome stranger with Jennifer? New conquest. Victoria followed his gaze to Eli. That's my senior strategy consultant. Consultant? Marcus's eyebrows rose. Is that what we're calling it these days? It's called hiring competent people. You should try it. She moved away before Marcus could respond, weaving through the crowd. She wasn't going to Eli. She was just circulating, networking. The fact that her path happened to lead toward the bar was coincidental. Eli spotted her before she reached him. His expression shifted, something warm replacing the polite mask he'd been wearing. Miss Chen. Mr. Brennan. She accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter. I didn't realize you'd be here. Jennifer invited me, said it would be good for company visibility. He gestured to his tuxedo. Had to rent this. Feel like a penguin. You look fine. More than fine. Victoria caught herself staring at the way the jacket emphasized his shoulders, quickly looking away. How do you know Jennifer? I consulted for her husband's firm last year. Eli sipped his whiskey. She's been supportive. Unlike some people. Some people pay your salary. Some people need to learn that support and control aren't the same thing. Before Victoria could respond, a woman in a red dress glided up to Eli, touching his arm with practiced familiarity. Eli Brennan. I heard rumors you were back in the city. Diane. Eli's smile was polite, but distant. Good to see you. Diane, whoever she was, had the kind of beauty that came from expensive maintenance and good genetics. She leaned closer to Eli, laughing at something he said. Her hand still on his arm. Victoria felt heat rise in her chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. Would you excuse us? Victoria heard herself say. I need to borrow Mr. Brennan. She didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked toward the terrace doors. Behind her, she heard Eli apologize and follow. The terrace was empty, the October air cool against her bare shoulders. Manhattan spread out below them, a galaxy of lights. What was that about? Eli asked, closing the terrace doors behind them. I need to discuss the Chicago investor meeting, Victoria lied. Right now? At a charity gala? Unless you'd rather go back to Diane? Eli's eyes narrowed. Are you jealous? Don't be ridiculous. You are. A slow smile spread across his face. Victoria Chen is jealous. I'm protective of my employees' time, Victoria said, but it sounded weak even to her ears. I'm not your employee. Eli stepped closer, and the space between them felt charged. You keep trying to put me in a box, but I don't fit. And that terrifies you. You don't terrify me. No. He was close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. Then why are you shaking? Victoria looked down and realized he was right. Her hands were trembling slightly. Dance with me, Eli said quietly. What? There's music. There's a terrace. Dance with me. It was a terrible idea. They were employer and consultant, oil and water, control and chaos. But Victoria found herself nodding, found herself stepping into his arms as a waltz drifted through the glass doors. Eli's hand settled on her waist, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. His other hand clasped hers, gentle but certain. They moved together, and Victoria was acutely aware of every point of contact, every breath, every heartbeat. You're good at this, she said. My mum made me take lessons. His voice rumbled in his chest. Said every man should know how to treat a woman like she's precious. The words made something ache in Victoria's chest. They danced in silence, the city watching, the music soft. Victoria let herself lean closer, just slightly, just enough to catch the cedar scent of him, to feel the solid warmth of his body. Victoria. Eli's voice was strained. She looked up and found him staring at her with an intensity that stole her breath. His hand tightened on her waist. She could feel the tension in his body, the same magnetic pull she'd been fighting for weeks. Miss Chen. Maya's voice shattered the moment. She appeared at the terrace doors, phone in hand, looking panicked. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have an emergency. Marcus Webb just pulled his investment in the Singapore office. Victoria stepped back, the spell broken. Business, reality, control. I'll be right there, she said, then looked at Eli. His expression was unreadable. As she walked past him, he caught her wrist. This conversation isn't finished. Yes, Victoria said quietly. It is. But they both knew she was lying. It was supposed to be about business. When did it become personal? The Chicago crisis hit at 7 a.m. the next morning. Victoria was halfway through her first espresso when Maya rushed into her office, tablet clutched to her chest. Michael Peterson is pulling out. Michael Peterson. The Chicago real estate mogul who'd promised $50 million for their Midwest expansion, the cornerstone of their entire regional strategy. Why? Victoria set down her cup carefully. He won't say, just that he's reassessing his portfolio priorities. Maya's fingers flew across the tablet. But his assistant mentioned he's meeting with Innovate Capital tomorrow. I think Marcus Webb got to him. Marcus. Of course. Rejected by Victoria at the gala last night. He'd gone after her investors. It was petty and effective. Get me on a plane to Chicago, Victoria said. Today. Already done. Private jet leaves at noon. Maya hesitated. There's one more thing. Michael specifically requested that Eli Brennan attend the meeting. Said he was impressed by his board presentation. Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't want to spend 3 days in Chicago with Eli, not after last night, not after feeling his hands on her waist, and almost forgetting every reason this was a bad idea. But Michael Peterson was too important to lose. Fine. Tell Brennan to be ready. 4 hours later, Victoria settled into the cream leather seat of her Gulfstream G650, watching Manhattan disappear beneath the clouds. Eli sat across from her, jacket off, tie loosened, scrolling through presentation notes on his tablet. Peninsula Hotel confirmed your reservations, the flight attendant said. Presidential suite, 2 bedrooms. 2 rooms, Victoria corrected. We need 2 separate rooms. The attendant's smile faltered. I'm sorry, Miss Chen. With the tech conference in town, the hotel is completely booked. The suite has 2 separate bedrooms with a shared living area. It's the best they could offer on short notice. Victoria's eyes met Eli's across the cabin. She saw her own awareness reflected in his gaze, the same tension that had hummed between them on the terrace. That'll be fine, Eli said, his voice carefully neutral. No, it won't, Victoria said. It's 2 bedrooms. Eli set down his tablet. We're adults. We can handle sharing a living room for 3 days. Could they? Victoria wasn't sure. But she didn't have a choice. 3 days in Chicago, alone with the one man she couldn't fire and couldn't stop thinking about. The Peninsula Hotel's presidential suite had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, marble bathrooms larger than most apartments, and 2 bedrooms separated by a living room that felt designed to remind wealthy people they were wealthy. Victoria claimed the master bedroom without discussion. Eli took the second bedroom without argument. They'd maintained careful distance since boarding the plane, speaking only about Michael Peterson's portfolio and the talking points for tomorrow's meeting. Professional. Safe. A lie they both needed. The meeting with Peterson the next morning took place in his office overlooking the Chicago River. Michael was 60, silver-haired, with the kind of Midwest charm that made people underestimate him. That was a mistake. The man hadn't built a commercial real estate empire by being nice. I'll be direct, Michael said, settling behind his desk. Marcus Webb offered me the same deal you did, plus 5% equity in the Singapore expansion. Why should I stay with Chen Dynamics? Victoria opened her mouth, but Eli spoke first. Because Marcus Webb's expansion model has a 60% failure rate in Asian markets. Eli pulled up a presentation on his tablet, connecting it to Michael's screen. He's offering you 5% of nothing. Victoria's offering you 20% of something sustainable. For the next hour, Eli walked Michael through the revised strategy with the kind of clarity that made complex financial projections feel like common sense. He anticipated every question, counted every objection, and by the time he finished, Michael was nodding. All right, Michael said. I'm in. But I want Brennan here as the point person for the Chicago office. Victoria's stomach dropped. Mr. Soles, Brennan's position is in New York. Then make a new position. Michael stood, extending his hand. That's my condition. This man knows what he's doing, and I trust him. Do we have a deal? Victoria looked at Eli, who kept his expression carefully neutral. We have a deal. That night, they celebrated at the hotel bar, a dimly lit space with leather booths and a view of the city lights reflected in the lake. Victoria ordered champagne, then another glass, then a third. You should slow down, Eli said, nursing his whiskey. I should do a lot of things I don't do. The champagne had loosened something inside her, some tightly controlled thing she usually kept locked away. You were brilliant today. I hate admitting that, but you were. Thank you. Eli's smile was soft, genuine. You weren't so bad yourself. My father would have hated your presentation. The words came out before Victoria could stop them. He would have said you were too cautious, too careful. He believed in burning bridges and asking forgiveness never. But you don't. I do. I did. Victoria stared into her glass. I built Chain Dynamics to prove him wrong. Every acquisition, every expansion, every risk. All of it was about showing him that I could do what he said I couldn't. That women could build empires. That I wasn't the disappointment he thought I was. You're not a disappointment, Victoria. He died thinking I was. She looked up, surprised to find Eli's eyes full of something that looked like understanding. Heart attack. I was 23. He left me nothing but debt and a note that said, try not to fail too publicly. Jesus. Eli's hand covered hers on the table. Victoria, I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. The contact felt electric. Dangerous. Right. Tell me about your father. Eli's expression shuttered. What makes you think there's anything to tell? Because you never mention him. Only your mother. He pulled his hand back, signaling the bartender for another drink. He wasn't in the picture. Mine was barely in the picture, even when he was alive. Victoria leaned closer, champagne courage making her bold. We have that in common. Absent fathers, building ourselves from nothing. Not nothing. Eli's voice was strained. You had money. A name. A name attached to a man who thought I'd fail. At least he acknowledged you existed. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning Victoria didn't quite understand. Before she could press, a voice interrupted them. Eli Brennan, I'll be damned. Victoria turned to see a man in his 50s, expensive suit, Chicago businessman written all over him. He clapped Eli on the shoulder like they were old friends. Tom Richardson, the man said, extending a hand to Victoria. I used to do business with Eli's father. How is Richard doing these days? Eli had gone completely pale. Tom, good to see you. We were just... Wait, Richard Chen? Tom's eyes widened. That's your father, right? Brilliant businessman. Worked with him on several deals before he passed. You have his eyes, you know. Victoria's blood turned to ice. Richard Chen was my father. Tom looked between them, confusion crossing his face. Oh, I didn't realize you two were... Well, family reunions can be awkward, can't they? He laughed, oblivious to the bomb he'd just detonated, and walked away. Victoria stared at Eli, who wouldn't meet her eyes. What did he mean? Victoria, what did he mean when he said Richard Chen was your father? Eli stood abruptly. We should talk, Upstairs. Not here. Her legs felt numb as she followed him to the elevator, her mind racing. Richard Chen, her father, Eli's father, the gap in his employment history, his mother, the executive assistant, the way he'd looked at her building, at her company, with something that had seemed like recognition. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor lasted forever, and not long enough. Inside the suite, Eli poured himself a drink with shaking hands. Victoria stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, waiting. "My mother's name was Sarah Brennan," Eli said finally. "She worked as Richard Chen's executive assistant for 8 years. They had an affair. She got pregnant. He promised to leave your mother, to acknowledge me. He never did." Victoria couldn't breathe. "You're lying." "I'm not." Eli turned to face her, and the misery in his eyes was real. "I'm your half-brother, Victoria. I've known since I was 16, when my mother finally told me the truth about my father. About our father. Everything she thought she knew shattered in that moment." "No." Victoria's voice came out hoarse. "No, you're lying. This is some kind of game, some kind of... I have letters." Eli set down his drink, moving toward his bedroom. "Photos. Proof." "Don't." Victoria held up a hand, stepping back. "Don't you dare move." They stood frozen 10 feet apart, the space between them suddenly a chasm. "You knew," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "This whole time, you knew who I was. And you took the job anyway. Why?" Eli's laugh was bitter. "Why do you think? Richard Chen left my mother with nothing. No acknowledgement, no support, no apology. Just a check once a month delivered by his lawyer with instructions to keep quiet. I grew up watching her work herself into exhaustion while he built an empire and pretended I didn't exist. So this was revenge." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "You came to destroy Chen, Dynamics, to destroy me." "Yes." The word was simple, brutal. "That was the plan. Take the consultant position, gain your trust, sabotage from the inside. Watch Richard Chen's precious legacy crumble." Victoria felt like she'd been gutted. Everything was a lie. The strategy sessions, the presentations, She couldn't finish. The almost kisses, the touches. The way he'd looked at her on that terrace. "It started as a lie," Eli said, and now his voice was raw with something that sounded like pain. "But somewhere along the way, it became real. You became real. This," he gestured between them, "became real." "Stop." Victoria's hands were shaking. "We're related. We're brother and sister. Whatever you think you feel, I know what I feel." Eli moved toward her, and Victoria backed up until she hit the window. "And I felt it before I knew the truth, before Tom Richardson said that name. I've been going insane trying to understand why I'm so drawn to you. Why every time you walk into a room I can't breathe. Why the thought of you with anyone else makes me want to burn the world down. We can't." Victoria's voice broke. "This can't happen. Not just because of the company or ethics or any rational reason. Because we share blood. Half-blood." Eli was close now. Too close. His hands bracing on the window on either side of her head. "We grew up in different worlds. We didn't know each other. Is that really..." "Yes." Victoria shoved at his chest. "Yes, it's really that. God, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me that I..." She stopped, horror washing over her. "I have feelings for my brother." "Don't." Eli's voice was fierce. "Don't make this uglier than it is. How could it be any uglier?" Tears burned Victoria's eyes. She refused to let them fall. "You came to destroy me." You lied about everything. And now I find out you're my... She couldn't say it. Couldn't make it real. I'm sorry. Eli's hands dropped. I'm so goddamn sorry, Victoria. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to... His voice cracked. I never meant to fall for you. Get out! Victoria, get out of my sight. She pushed past him, grabbed her phone and purse. Stay in this suite. Stay in Chicago. I don't care. But if I see you in my office tomorrow, I will destroy you. Contract or no contract. Where are you going? Anywhere you're not. She made it to the hallway before the tears came. Made it to the elevator before the sobs started. She called Maya from the lobby, instructed her to book a commercial flight home immediately, told her to have legal start contract termination procedures for Eli Brennan, not Brennan. Chen. Her brother had stood in her office and challenged her. Her brother had danced with her on that terrace. Her brother had almost kissed her, and she had wanted him to. The thought made Victoria physically sick. She'd invited the enemy into her company, into her heart. In the suite 32 floors above, Eli stood at the window, watching the city blur through tears he didn't bother to wipe away. He'd destroyed the one thing his revenge was supposed to protect. His mother had loved Richard Chen despite everything, had talked about him with a sadness that never quite faded. Now Eli understood. Because he'd just done the same thing his father had. He'd fallen in love with someone he could never have. And unlike his father, he couldn't even blame circumstance or timing. This destruction was entirely his own. The flight back to New York was silent. Victoria had upgraded to first class on American Airlines, leaving Chicago at 6 a.m. to avoid Eli entirely. But when she boarded, there he was, sitting in seat 2A. He'd apparently had the same idea. I can move to coach, Eli said quietly. Don't bother. Victoria took her seat across the aisle, pulled out her laptop, and didn't look at him for the entire 4-hour flight. She felt him watching her, felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing against her ribs until she couldn't breathe. But she didn't look, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge his existence. At JFK, he tried one more time. Victoria, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. She kept walking toward the town car waiting at arrivals. You're Richard Chen's illegitimate son who infiltrated my company for revenge. That about cover it? That's not all of it. It's enough. Victoria climbed into the car. Maya will send you the contract termination paperwork. Don't fight it. You'll lose. Will I? Something flashed in Eli's eyes. You signed an ironclad 1-year agreement. Breaking it will cost you 7 figures and tank your stock price when investors find out your senior strategy consultant quit after 1 month. Is your pride worth that? Victoria slammed the car door and told her driver to go. Back at Chen Dynamics, she summoned her legal team. 3 lawyers spread the contract across her conference table, pointing out every clause, every penalty, every loophole that didn't exist. He's right, Gregory Marks, her lead counsel, said grimly. Terminating without cause will cost you $1.2 million plus stock options. And the optics are terrible. The board just voted to adopt his strategy. If you fire him now, it looks like retaliation. I don't care about optics. You should. Gregory removed his glasses. Your stock dropped 2 points this afternoon on rumors of internal conflict. Fire Brennan, and we're looking at a 10 to 15% loss. Maybe more. Victoria stared at the contract, at Eli's signature next to hers. She'd walked right into his trap. Then we freeze him out, she said. No projects, no meetings, no access. Let him sit in an office and collect his salary until the contract runs out. Victoria, do it. But freezing him out was harder than destroying him. 2 weeks of Cold War. Victoria threw herself into work with a ferocity that worried even Maya. 18-hour days. Weekend boardroom sessions. Conference calls at midnight. Anything to avoid thinking about green eyes and careful hands, and the way he'd said her name like a prayer. Eli kept his distance. When she entered a room, he left. When she called meetings, he sent written reports. They existed in the same company, on the same floor, and never spoke. The board noticed. Jennifer Parr cornered Victoria after a particularly tense quarterly review. What happened in Chicago? Jennifer asked bluntly. Nothing that concerns the board. When our 2 key strategists won't be in the same room, it concerns the board. Performance metrics are down. You're both miserable. And the Peterson deal is stalling because neither of you will get on a call together. Eli can handle it. Eli's working 20-hour days trying to fix problems you don't even know about. Jennifer pulled out her tablet. Last week, the Singapore investor group threatened to pull out. Eli spent 3 days on calls convincing them to stay. The Jakarta office had a security breach. Eli flew out on his own dime to handle it. Your expansion isn't succeeding because of you right now, Victoria. It's succeeding despite you. The words stung. He told you that? He didn't have to. I have eyes. After Jennifer left, Victoria sat in her dark office, staring at project reports. Jennifer was right. Eli had been protecting the company even as Victoria tried to exclude him. Why? She called Maya. I need everything we have on Richard Chen's personal life. Affairs, assistants, anything from 30 to 40 years ago. Miss Chen. Do it. 3 days later, Maya delivered a file folder. Inside were letters, photos, bank statements. Evidence of an affair with Sarah Brennan that lasted 8 years. Monthly checks to a P.O. box in Boston. Legal documents establishing a trust fund that had never been activated. And one letter, in her father's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before his death. Sarah, I cannot acknowledge the boy. Victoria needs to believe I was better than I was. Let him think what he wants. But the truth is, I'm not sure he's mine. There were others. You knew that. The checks will continue until he turns 18. After that, he's on his own. Ah. Victoria read it 3 times, nausea rising in her throat. Her father had been exactly the bastard she'd suspected, and worse than she'd known. But that last line, I'm not sure he's mine. She grabbed her phone, called her doctor. I need a DNA test, discreet, fast. I need to know if someone is related to me. We'd need a sample from both parties. Victoria thought about the coffee cup Eli used every morning, the one he left in the conference room. I can get a sample. 4 days later, the results came back. No genetic relationship detected. Richard Chen had lied, to Sarah, to Eli, to everyone. Eli wasn't her brother, but she'd already pushed him away. The emergency board meeting was called at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, which meant disaster. Victoria walked into the conference room to find every board member already seated, their expressions grim. Richard Coleman stood at the head of the table, and the man beside him made Victoria's blood run cold. Warren Hughes, her father's original business partner, the man Richard had bought out 20 years ago. The man who'd sworn he'd destroyed Chen Dynamics if it took the rest of his life. Victoria. Warren's smile was all teeth. Thank you for joining us. What is this? Victoria remained standing, her instincts screaming danger. This, Warren said, sliding a folder across the table, is a formal acquisition offer. Hughes Ventures is prepared to purchase Chen Dynamics for $2 billion. 40% below market value, but generous considering your current circumstances. Victoria opened the folder. The offer was real, backed by a consortium of investors. But more damning were the attached documents, internal emails, financial projections, strategy memos, confidential information that should never have left this building. We have an insider. Victoria looked at each board member. Someone's been feeding Hughes information for months. Longer than that, Warren said pleasantly. I've had someone in your inner circle for over a year. Someone who understands that loyalty should be rewarded, not punished. The conference room door opened. David Morrison walked in. Victoria's COO, her ex-boyfriend. The man she'd promoted over 3 other candidates because she'd trusted him. David? Her voice came out strangled. I'm sorry, Vic. David had the grace to look uncomfortable as he took a seat beside Warren. But you left me no choice. You've become reckless, emotional. The Eli Brennan hire? That was the final straw. You've been spying on me. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The Chicago trip, the board resistance to my expansion, the investor pullouts. That was all you. I was protecting the company, David said. From you. You're so obsessed with proving yourself that you can't see you're driving us into the ground. The Southeast Asian expansion will fail. Everyone knows it except you. Eli's strategy. Eli's a fraud. David pulled up a presentation on the screen. His real name is Eli Chen. He's Richard Chen's illegitimate son, here for revenge. I've been monitoring him since before you hired him. When I realized you were falling for him, I knew I had to act. Victoria felt the eyes of every board member on her, saw the judgment, the doubt, the satisfaction in Warren Hughes's face. You used Eli as a distraction, Victoria said slowly, while you set up the takeover. Smart girl. Warren stood. The vote is simple. Accept our offer, step down as CEO, and walk away with enough money to salve your wounded pride. Or fight us and lose everything when we execute our hostile takeover in 48 hours. We have the shares, we have the votes, and we have the proof that you've been too compromised to lead. Richard Coleman cleared his throat. Victoria, I'm sorry, but the board agrees. If you don't accept this offer, we'll have to ask for your resignation. The room spun. Victoria gripped the edge of the table, her father's company, her life's work, slipping through her fingers like water. There's one option. Jennifer Parks spoke up from the end of the table. Eli Brennan's strategy. The one we approve but never fully implemented. If we execute it now, aggressively, we can show the shareholders that Chen Dynamics has a viable path forward. It might be enough to block the takeover. Brennan's gone, David said. Victoria froze him out 2 weeks ago. He's not going to help her now. Victoria looked at the DNA results still in her purse. The apology she'd been too proud to make. The bridge she'd burned because she was too afraid to trust. Pride or survival. Control or surrender. I need 48 hours, Victoria said. Warren laughed. To do what? To save my company. She looked at Richard Coleman. Give me 2 days. If I can't stop this takeover, I'll sign your papers and walk away. Richard looked at the other board members, then nodded slowly. 48 hours. But Victoria? If you fail, you're done. Victoria walked out of the conference room with her head high and her heart in pieces. She had one option left, one person who might be able to save her. The man she'd destroyed. Eli's apartment was in Brooklyn, a converted warehouse in Dumbo, with exposed brick and Manhattan views. Victoria had gotten the address from Maya, who'd looked at her with something like hope when she asked for it. She knocked at 7 p.m., still in her suit, still carrying the weight of the worst day of her professional life. Eli opened the door in jeans and a t-shirt, surprise flickering across his face before settling into careful neutrality. "Victoria, can I come in?" He stepped aside without a word. The apartment was sparse but comfortable. Books everywhere, a laptop open on the coffee table, Chinese takeout containers in the kitchen. This was where he lived when he wasn't playing consultant, when he wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. "David's been working with Warren Hughes," Victoria said without preamble. "They're executing a hostile takeover. I have 48 hours to stop it or I lose everything." Eli's expression darkened. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" She turned to face him. "You came to destroy Chen Dynamics. You're getting what you wanted." "No." His voice was rough. "I'm not." "Why not?" "Because somewhere between planning revenge and executing it, I fell in love with the woman I was supposed to destroy." Eli shoved his hands in his pockets. "And now I get to watch her lose everything, while I do nothing. That's not victory, Victoria. That's hell." The words hung in the air between them. Victoria reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulled out the DNA results. "We're not related," she said quietly. "My father lied to your mother. He lied to you. I had samples tested. There's no genetic connection between us." Eli took the paper, read it once, then again. His hands were trembling. "We're not. Brother and sister. No." Victoria stepped closer. "Which means I pushed you away for nothing. I destroyed what we had because I was too scared to find out the truth. Because it was easier to believe the worst than to fight for something real." "Victoria, I'm sorry." The words cracked, coming out. "I'm sorry for freezing you out. For not listening. For being too proud to see that you were protecting my company, even after I tried to destroy you. You're a better person than I deserve, Eli. Better than my father, better than me." "That's not true." "It is." She was close enough now to see the gold flecks in his eyes, to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "And I need your help. Not just for the company. I need you. Because you're the only person who's ever told me the truth, even when it hurt. Even when it cost you everything. Why should I help you?" But his voice was soft, and his hand had come up to cup her face. "Because despite everything, I trust you." Victoria leaned into his touch. "And because I love you. I'm in love with you. And I was too afraid to admit it until I thought I'd lost you." Eli's thumb traced her cheekbone. "You didn't lose me. You couldn't. I tried to let you go, Victoria. Couldn't do it. So you'll help me?" "I'll do more than that." He pulled her closer. "I'll save your company. But after? We're having a very long conversation about trust and honesty and not pushing people away when you're scared. Deal?" They had 48 hours to save an empire. Or lose everything. The next 2 days blurred into a marathon of strategy sessions, investor calls, and calculated risks. Eli moved back into Chen Dynamics like he'd never left. But everything was different now. Victoria didn't fight his suggestions. She amplified them. When he proposed aggressive expansion into Jakarta to prove viability, she committed double the resources. When he suggested bringing in Michael Peterson as a strategic partner, she flew to Chicago herself to make the pitch. They worked side by side, in her office, in conference rooms, in the back of town cars racing between meetings. The old tension was still there, but transmuted into something else. Partnership, trust, a recognition that together they were better than either had been alone. At midnight on the second night, Victoria fell asleep at her desk. She woke to find Eli's jacket draped over her shoulders, his hand gentle on her arm. "We did it," he said softly. "Peterson's in. Singapore confirmed. We have enough shareholder support to block Warren's takeover." The emergency board meeting the next morning was swift and brutal. Victoria presented Eli's strategy, backed by commitments from 5 major investors and projections that made Warren Hughes's offer look like the desperate grab it was. "The vote," Richard Coleman said, "is whether to reject the Hughes Ventures acquisition and proceed with the Chen Brennan expansion strategy. All in favor?" Every hand went up. Warren Hughes walked out without a word. David Morrison was fired on the spot, escorted from the building by security. Victoria stood at the head of the conference table, victorious. But when she looked at Eli, standing at the back of the room, she realized the victory felt hollow without him beside her. They'd won the war, but they still hadn't addressed what was between them. The rooftop of Chen Dynamics was empty at sunset, the Manhattan skyline painted gold and crimson. Victoria found Eli there, hands in his pockets, watching the city. "You saved my company," she said. "We saved our company." He turned to face her. "That's what partners do." "About that," Victoria took a breath, "I want to offer you the COO position. Full equity, board seat, everything." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, "No." Her heart sank. "Eli, I don't want to work for you, Victoria." He closed the distance between them, and she could see her whole future in his eyes. "I want to work with you, as equals, co-CEOs. We rebuild Chen Dynamics together, from the ground up. Your vision, my strategy. Your courage, my caution. Business partners and..." He paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Everything else?" Victoria smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. "Everything else?" "Everything else." Eli pulled her close, and when he kissed her, the city lights blurred behind her closed eyes. It started with her getting whatever she wanted. It ended with her learning to want something different, something real. So, what do you think? Did Victoria make the right choice? Could you trust someone who came into your life planning to destroy everything you'd built? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, it would mean the world if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. I share new romance stories every week, and next week's story, even more intense. Think forbidden love, dangerous secrets, and a connection that could cost them everything. Feel free to share this with anyone who loves a good power dynamic romance, and there's another enemies to lovers story linked on screen if you're not ready to leave yet. Thank you for being here and sharing this journey with me. I hope this story brought you a little escape, made your heart race, and reminded you that even the most powerful people need someone who sees them for who they really are. Take care of yourself and remember, you deserve a love that challenges you, respects you, and accepts all of you. Until next time, I'll see you in the next story. Take care.